so excited to have this opportunity to bring Gil Hedley onto the podcast today. Gil, you are an inspiration to me. I've been hearing about you for years and enjoying your content on YouTube. You're a master anatomy teacher and use the terminology somanot. This is just a real honor to have you here. Thank you so much. How are you doing today?
Thank you, fellow Somanot. I'm doing good.
Did you
I'm
come up
happy
with
to
that
be
term,
here.
or did you come up with that term, or did you
I
hear?
did. I did. I was actually I was the editor of the Rolf Lines Journal back in the mid 90s when I had completed my PhD and started my Rolfing career. And they're like, "Oh, you do this thing, do this Rolf Lines Journal thing for us." So for I don't
Very
know, 2 or 3 years, I was editor of Rolf Lines, and I interviewed Emily Conrad,
Mm.
and I forgot to press play or
Oh,
record. I
oh,
talked to her for like 2 straight hours, and then I was like, damn, I had one of those little handheld mini cassette recorders. This was back in the 90s. And so I
yes.
was like, I got to write an article anyway. That was great. So basically, I was trying to describe Emily for the Rolf Lines audience, and I called her a Somonaut. Soma for body and not for navigator and sailor, so a body sailor, a body navigator. So I quickly adopted it as my own
That
sort of name, being Somonautics was what I called my business back then. And and everyone wants to be a Somonaut now. So all you got to do is admit that you're interested in diving into inner space and voila, you're a Somonaut.
I love it. That's so cool. And Gil, I'm really excited to see you when you're on a tour right now that you call the Nerve Tour.
Hmm.
For those that are listening, Gil is in his motorhome. For those watching on YouTube, you
It's
can
beautiful
see
decor here.
you can see his backdrop. Very creative. I like it. And yeah, I see that you're touring 111 cities across the United States over it looks like a period of like maybe 8 months or so. Um,
Well, actually, we started in October, got to back home for Christmas around December 19th and hit the road again about a week ago, and we'll go quite right on through next December.
Amazing.
So
Well,
we'll
that's
have some
longer
time at
than
home. I will
yeah.
be returning to Colorado with Rachel. She has projects to do, and I will be teaching my regular dissection schedule in the lab. So I have three dissections scheduled for this year that I'll return home for. But other than that, we're gonna be city after city. We wanted to go everywhere, so that's what we're doing.
Oh my gosh. All of you listening, please check his website. It's gilheadley.com and you can see the whole list. And if he's coming to your town, you can check him out. How is it being on the road like that? I mean, I think it would be amazing, but obviously being on the road for that long of a time can be challenging. What is your experience thus far?
It's fun actually. We get to be in all kinds of cool places and meet wonderful, warm audiences in different cities, and we make a point of trying out the local diner or what have you. We try and go as off-brand as possible, off corporate brand as possible, and see what folks are doing locally. So that's fun for us, and we do a lot of driving, a lot of admin. It's a bottomless pit of admin to run a project this massive. And fortunately, I couldn't do it without Rachel, my partner,
Yes.
and also a number of other people in the background who are sort of keeping us going. We do a lot of camper maintenance. When you
Yeah,
have a vehicle that's your home and your office and your tour bus, it takes a beating. So we keep up with our camper and
I bet.
sleep at a lot of truck stops and roadside rest areas on the highways. We'll take what we can get. Uh, Folks are like, stay at my house, come in, we'll have a bedroom for you. I'm like, no, I have my bedroom, thank you. It's perfect.
I believe
We
it.
appreciate the hospitality and we tend to pass on it because I don't know, I like to know where my toothbrush is every night. So
That's awesome, Gil. You seem dedicated and committed to educating people about human anatomy. Can you give me a little bit
That
of,
is true. I am on a mission. I'm sort of obsessed actually.
and this tour is about the nerve tour or about the nervous system, I'm gathering. I'm sure it encompasses everything, but can you give me a little bit of insight into what your goal is with this education
Yeah,
process that you're involved in?
absolutely. Yeah, I undertook a large project um a year ago, basically January through May of 2023. I was full time in the lab. I'm talking super full time, filming doing the dissection of a donor who I call Captain. He was a pilot, and so I wanted to do a detailed dissection of the nerve tissues in relationship to demonstrate that through photography and footage. Um, it's not something I've been able to do throughout my career. Being I've been carefully bringing forward the textural biological layers of the body, because I feel like body workers, whether they structural integrators or otherwise, can really connect through texture. And so that's been my emphasis and demonstrating continuity across regions. I'm not a regional anatomist, I'm an integral anatomist. So I'm very keen to demonstrate relationship, continuity, um, and these textural layers as whole body and whole person phenomenon, really. So that's been going great. But when you dissect by layers, you prune the nerve tree really hard when you do it.
Mm,
So I've demonstrated the central nervous system in my workshops hundreds of times, um, but more the peripheral branching of the nerve tree, I haven't found as much detail in, no less the autonomics, which are really hard to dissect. So I thought, let me just do this project, and it will create basically a visual document of the nerve tree in the wild, in the woods, in someone's body, not just in a book. So we can see that and, basically up the game of the bodywork community, the yoga, Pilates, fitness industries in their relationship to the nervous system done from an integral approach. So that's kind of my goal. Not only that, upping that game, but also bringing on board into my world those folks who have a keen interest in the nervous system already, have studied it in their preparation for their career. Doctors, osteopaths, naturopaths, allopaths, chiropractors, PTs, OTs, the kind of people in those sort of other allied medical professions, as well as the physicians themselves who have a keen interest in the nerve tissues. But it takes a lot to put it together in an actual body. It takes a lot to put it together from the books. You can't actually. And so I did take it even further than I had hoped, actually, in the 5 months that I worked on the project. So that I have a wonderful compendium of videos now that document these tissues. And also, the finale is quite beautiful because I did manage to kind of extract the whole nervous tree from the body, including the autonomics, the musculoskeletal plexuses, the sympathetic trunk, spinal cord, all in relationship. So you see it as the one thing that it is, but that you can't put together by paging through a book.
wow. Has anybody done this to the level that you've taken it that you know of?
Yes, actually, in 1925, it
Huh.
doesn't happen often, but in 1925, there were two medical students at the Kirksville College of Osteopathic Medicine in Kirksville, Missouri. And their professors noticed what a great job they did on this arm. And they were like, do that to the whole body.
Wow.
And they gave him a cadaver, and they spent 1,500 hours, this pair of medical students, and did the most astonishing demonstration of the nerve tissues that I think may ever be done. I couldn't compete with it, to be honest. But there's only been a few others Von Hagens has a pretty nice demonstration um, in the Body Worlds exhibit. But I kind of took it a little further actually because I did the autonomic plexuses in great detail and brought them out together with the rest. So it was really interesting. So,
I can't imagine what type of physical skill does this require. I read a book by Abraham Verghese recently, both of his Cutting for Stone and Covenant of Water, where in some of his writing he'll speak about the intricacy of how skillful the going into the cadaver, how much skill is required and the finesse. Can you explain a little bit about the challenge that that presented you?
mm, thanks for asking. Not many people even think about that, but it was. I had to dissect very differently than I usually do. Um, in the lab for a class, I'm kind of going for speed.
Mm,
So I expedite the dissections as I want the participants to take their time and to really connect with what they're doing. And I can kind of promise not to worry. You'll never get behind because I can come out behind you and catch it up,
mm,
very quickly. So
yes.
and so there's a lot of skill in that actually, and I have a really deep connection to the tissue textures that allow me to work differently with each biological textural layer so that, they come out nicely. And yet when approaching the nerve tissues, I had to kind of abandon that strategy,
Wow.
slow it way down, put the scalpel down. This is not scalpel work. This is paddling. So I have this little stainless steel spatula that's way smaller than my pinky. It's about a millimeter thick and not as broad as my pinky. And I basically dissected his body with a little tiny metal spatula
Wow.
and and a hemostat. So paddle, pull, paddle, pull, paddle, pull, and did that for hundreds of hours in excruciating physical positions that I'm still recovering from, even 7 months after the project ended,
Wow.
because it's like doing a yoga posture for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, bent and twisted, while, trying to hold the glasses onto the tip of my nose while I go like this kinda, so it wasn't comfortable. And so there's a lot that goes into why this sort of thing doesn't happen very often,
Mm,
just the sheer physicality of it. And then the skill is to not cut anything. It's like a negative skill. It's like, are you patient enough and slow enough that you can bring this tissue forward into visibility without destroying it? And even that being said, you still have to take away more than the thing is in order for there to be any potential for a visual connection or recognition.
interesting.
So you have to. It's a process of abstracting, abstraho, to draw away from. You're constantly drawing tissues away until you've drawn away just enough that it's clear enough that you can say, aha, I'm actually looking at something rather than just a massive wall of inscrutable lymphatics or something like that.
Wow. I first heard about you when I was taking a neuromuscular therapy training with Judith Delaney here in
Mm,
Miami, and people were raving about you and your skill as a teacher in the cadaver realm. And I've never had that opportunity myself. I am extremely interested and would love to try it. So I'm so fascinated to hear some of like the intricacies of what you're speaking of in terms of the skill
yeah, it's super
involved.
fun, and I can take anybody, especially body workers, because y'all have great connection with the body with your hands. Medical students don't have that, right? It's way harder to teach medical students dissection than it is to teach body workers dissection, right? Because of that built-in comfort with the body. You ask a medical student to like hold the head and they don't know what to do with it. They think it's like
Mm.
a bowl of china. Whereas you'd ask a body worker to hold the head and they're like, so it makes all the difference in the world, also to have self-motivated learners, in the lab. So it's one thing to be told you have to do a dissection. It's another thing to say, I'm going to save up my money and put away a week of my life, and I'm going to fly somewhere and do a dissection. That's a lot of, that level of interest makes for a really powerful learning opportunity for everybody because everybody's on board and in with both feet and excited to learn, has a base of knowledge, and then we're going to basically destroy that base of knowledge in order to create a new base of knowledge that's based on an actual tissue, actual body, actual human anatomy, as opposed to 2D book images.
Very cool. Did you, is this, is this something that like you were interested in as a child? What piqued your interest? What was your, when did
I
you get bit by the
yeah,
sort of bug?
freshman year in high school, I
Oh,
I had skipped into the biology class instead of the earth sciences or whatever. And the teacher, we had a rat, so I did a great job on my rat, so much so that she told me and my buddy, you should do this cat. And so the teacher had an extra cat from the advanced biology class. So freshman year, I dissected a cat. I must have been whatever, 13, 14 years old, and I loved it. And by the time I got to be a senior, I was walking around the advanced biology lab teaching my friends how to dissect their cats. And feeling
wow.
very comfortable with it at an early age. But when I went to college, I had a job in the biology lab bagging fetal pigs and cleaning out test tubes, but I didn't do any dissection in college. I didn't do any dissection again, actually, until I was in grad school. And um, I had gone to the Rolf Institute and done the massage training, the foundations of bodywork, they called it, way back in the early 90s. And 91, I took that. And so I learned massage, it's basic Swedish, Esalen style, Swedish type of massage. And when I got back to grad school and started practicing on my friends, I had one friend say, "Hey, I'm in medical school. I had a med school at the University of Illinois, and I need a study partner. I'm going to go in on the weekends to study for our Monday test. Do you want to come with me?" I was like, "Sure." And so, they would have done an arm that week, and then there'd be one arm left. So you do that arm while I study this arm, and you do that leg, I'll study this leg. So I did that for I think 4 iterations. I went into the lab with him. That was my initial
Wow.
dissection experience. And I actually signed up with the medical school at University of Chicago. One of the professors there, I'm like, "Hi, I'm in an ethics program, but I really want to dissect a cadaver." He's like, "All right, I'll see if I can find you one." And I was going to do kind of an independent study, even in grad school. I was so keen on it. And that didn't actually go through, but by the time I trained and completed my Rolfing training, I went to the annual meeting in, I think it was 1993 or 1994, and they were having their first meeting of the anatomy faculty in like 10 years. So Tom Myers and Robert Schleip and Louis Schultz and just the whole gang from back then. And Tom and Robert were like, "Gil, why don't you come to our anatomy meeting?" Ron Thompson, that whole gang. And so wonderful people. And so I went and I was like, "Hey, fellas," it was all guys, it was like 10 guys. "Hey, wouldn't it be neat if y'all did that, dissection again, like you did 10 years before that?" Well, Ida Rolf had been there and she had, gone into the lab with Lewis and Ron Thompson. Ron took a million pictures and that became the basis of a whole study. And I thought, let's repeat that. It's time. They're like, "Yeah, that's a great idea. First guy to get a cadaver, we'll all go there and we'll do it." I was like, "Awesome." And so it let it lie. And then like 2, 3 months later, I'm like, "How come I haven't gotten the call yet? Like, where's the cadaver? When are we going to go?" And so I'm calling the other folks, and they're like, "I didn't get a cadaver." I was like, "Oh, that was my idea. No one's going to do this. I have to do it." So I called around a little bit and lined up a cadaver and a laboratory. I was Dr. Hedley at that point. I could be like, "Hello, this is Dr. Hedley. I represent the International Anatomy Faculty of the Rolf Institute, and we would like ourselves a laboratory and a cadaver, please." And the dude was like, "You come to my office. We'll chat about that." I was like, "Oh." I made dear friends with that guy, Roger Faison, and he invited me, and I was like, "Okay, well, I got the cadaver, I got the lab." I called the other people up, and they're like, "I have recently bought a horse and need to shoe it." You know, "I have recently married and I am in bed." So I was like, "They're not coming. Oh no." So I got my Rolf Institute directory and like went to started doing like a 1 mile, then a 5 mile radius around the lab, then a 10 mile, 20 mile radius around the lab, and just called people until I had put together a group of 8 people and
Wow.
I led my first dissection because I'm like, well, they don't know what they're doing, and I'm ahead of the game by 4 days. So that's
Wow.
how it started.
That's amazing, Gil. So focused, so dedicated,
Yeah,
hungry
and
for it.
quickly
Yeah.
before you knew it, that's what I wanted to do. I was more interested in the anatomy than I was finding myself teaching anatomy to my Rolfing clients without without their really keen interest. So I'm like,
That's
I think I want to, so I just
amazing.
expanded that. When I ran out of Rolfers, I went to the massage therapist, and then and then that expanded into just anyone, who had an interest. I stopped advertising in like 1993, I think. No,
Oh,
sorry, 2003. 2003, I was advertising full page ads in a massage magazine and that kind of thing. And then I was like, no, I just want to see what happens with word of mouth. So I just dropped the advertising. And at that point, the people who I had taught already had just told their friends. And it's been word of mouth ever
word
since.
of
My
mouth.
whole business is word of mouth. Even this
Amazing.
tour is word of mouth. I haven't advertised in magazines or anything like that.
It's so cool. I know I've been enjoying watching your website and just seeing the way that you've laid out the excitement for
Hmm.
the event. On that note, what have you learned about the
What
next?
if
What
have you
what
got like
what ha
35 hours, maybe 40 hours? We can chat. No, what have I learned?
okay,
Well,
I
one
realize
thing
it's a
that,
big question. Yeah, I mean, I'm
yeah,
so curious
so
about it. There's got to be some insights, some big ones.
yeah, absolutely. There's so many insights. I'll give you 5 hours worth of insights at the talk, and then I'll edit the 97 days of footage and give you a bit more. Um, well, for one thing, uh, the nervous system is a mental abstract convention, right? That's a left brain
Totally
box or
understand. Yeah.
category.
Yeah.
And what we actually have is the human body, an embryo differentiated into all kinds of textures and structures that remain one. A nerve is an organ, not you know, uh, any given nerve is a composite of tissues. It has its blood vessels with their epithelial, there's nerve tissue, there's connective tissue, right? In other words, you can't separate these things. You can't separate the brain from the heart. You can't separate the nervous tissue from the connective tissue. You can't separate these things. They're functioning whole, right? And so when we say a nerve, even people are thinking a neuron. They're not thinking of it as a composite structure in relationship to other tissues and only functioning in that relationship. So many times while dissecting, we're like, is this a nerve or is this like connective tissue? And it's like, yes, it's a
Mm.
nerve and it's connective tissue. That's innervated fascia, or that string there is a fibrous collagenous guitar string with communication pathways running through it. So you can't physically differentiate these things. You can only mentally differentiate them. So I think that's important to know that you're always touching all of it. That
Yes.
doesn't mean you can't be specific in your touch, though. You can be highly specific in your touch through intention, right? And through your connection to the different textures, because the body, though it is one, is differentiated into many textures. But the brain's tendency, once you differentiate something, is to separate it out and to make it a distinct individual remembered thing. And it's never that in the actual body. It's never that. It's always the whole.
Mm.
That's the right brain's lesson, basically that it perceives the whole in context. Everything is in context. And so what I love to do is show people the context of their favorite thing so that they have an expanded understanding and a more comprehensive and meaningful and more therapeutically relevant understanding of the thing that's your favorite. So if your favorite thing is fascia, great. I'm going to show you fascia in relationship. You come in as a massage therapist and your brain is in the muscle. I'm going to say, great. You love muscle tissue. Well, let me show you what that really is, because every named muscle tissue is a mental abstraction, right, that's been cut away from the body. It's not what it actually is, number one. Number two, it has viscera. Every named muscle tissue has guts. It has the brain and heart plugged into its belly. It has a belly, it has lymphatics, it has everything. So let's understand something like even a muscle as an organ in relationship and put it into context of its fascia and expand from there. Now, massage therapists, you don't go, it's Wednesday before you see muscle tissue in my dissection class. So people are like, we started on Monday. I just spent 2 days. I'm really confused. I'm lost at sea here. I haven't seen my best friends yet. I'm like, sorry, that's what a human body is.
Yeah.
And I'm dragging this out so that you can enter into relationship with what a human body actually is rather than the fantasy that you're touching.
Wow. Great point. Fascinating. I saw one of your YouTube videos you made. There's a lot of myths and a lot of things we say as either massage therapists or yoga teachers that might be a little incorrect. And I'm curious, say a classic one might be breathe deeper or work with your breath to calm your nervous system. Do you
Oh, I
feel
think that's totally doable. That's a great idea, actually. I mean, what a great way to link into your autonomic nervous system than through modulating your breath. I mean, if I'm teaching anything on this tour, it's that we can enter into relationship with our nervous system in a way that facilitates our self-regulation. Because at the moment, we're suffering from massive whole society level limbic hijack, uh, right? We're suffering from
Yeah.
uh,
Yes.
a takeover of our nervous system by
Mm,
energies that are very over in their fear mongering,
yeah.
etc.
Yes.
There's a lot of stress in the air. We have a whole generation of kids who are like um, stressed to degrees that are beyond anything anyone has ever experienced. I have great empathy for them because they're being asked to endure a kind of stress level that keeps them at a peak of anxiety. And I'm trying to step in with this tour and say, okay, so great, that's going on. And also, here's these little things you can do for yourself to self-regulate
Mm.
and take back. I don't want to say, I guess I'll say control because I'm not, it's not so much about controlling yourself in a negative sense, but stepping into the role of leader for yourself rather than allowing yourself to be led like by the bull ring down a path of fear and anxiety that's being served up by the shovelful all day long because it keeps our attention. So, our attention is a commodity right now to a degree never surpassed. Our attention is, we are the product that's being sold, our attention. And anyone who can grasp that attention and sell it is going to make money. So the question is, how do we pay attention to ourselves? How do we give ourselves, I don't, and say, oh, we're the most narcissistic people that's ever roamed the planet. Yes and no. Because actually, are we really paying attention to ourselves, or are we paying attention to what we're told matters about ourselves by certain strategists who would sell our attention? So if we turn the table a little bit and step in and say, "Oh, I can actually feel into myself. How do I feel? Oh, it's a little ratty in here, a little wired, a little crazy. Okay, so what can we do about that? Is there anything that we could do to shift that? I mean, just literally going and just when you're in that state, literally just blowing some wind across your lip membranes here, right? Just making breath go over epithelium and just pay attention to how that feels. And do it. Just do it a few times. And it's like, oh, okay. All of a sudden, I don't even remember the news. I don't, I'm not sure when my taxes are due at this moment. It's okay.
Great point,
I
Gail.
can have a moment here. Or I'm in the nerve tour, I'm taking people through certain like brain interoceptive exercises where you can feel your way in there. And honestly, it feels so good
Yes.
to make those connections. And then it's like, oh, even though I feel bad a lot, I can feel good on purpose,
Mm.
in a way that actually regulates my nervous system. In which case, the, I have a choice with regard to how my nervous system is being led.
Great point, Gil. I'm so glad you're bringing this up. I'm raising two young children right now, and well, teenager and 17 and 10, and I
Mm,
can attest to 110% to what you're saying.
yeah.
I feel it in my own experience, but as I'm watching children, I definitely
Hmm.
I like that you're bringing so much attention to the fact that how intensely hijacked concentration, awareness, and what to focus on is right now.
Yeah.
It is a big deal.
It's
Yeah.
a big deal. And it's kind of like our lives depend on it. I feel like it's really a big deal.
Yeah, I
In
agree
other
with you.
words, we're spending our lives. That's what we do here on planet Earth. So, how are we spending them? Like, where are, because this is what we're doing. We wake up in the morning and you're going to spend a day. You know, how
Yeah.
are you going to spend it? And we can spend it, in a way that, enhances our experience and those of the people around us. We can fritter it away. It's all right. We're allowed to fritter some of it away. That's part of the deal here too. You can fritter. You can waste some of your life, and we're allowed. But we don't have to spend it
Great.
for purposes that that aren't necessarily supporting our experience.
Well, good point. I like the way that you're blending your passion for anatomical study, but then bringing it into a relatable, in the moment, day to day experience. So this sounds more than just a look at these tissues, study, memorize the name, and now take a
Oh,
test and hopefully fill in the blank correctly. But
that
bring
was
bring the actual understanding of the human body, but into real life experience. So, and I also noticed that you have a PhD in theological studies, where I'm getting this sense of your philosophical inquiry aligned with your physical, like actually investigating the body, the physical body that you can touch and feel, which is fascinating. Can you
Yeah,
share?
I'm wanting to bring those worlds together a bit. Or let's just say I am bringing those worlds together in myself.
Well done.
So just for having,
Yeah.
you know, gotten a PhD in ethics from the University of Chicago, uh, and then that world was constantly evaluating, studying, and pontificating,
Mm,
making rules or studying rules with respect to the body while having no knowledge or connection of the body or sense of embodiment. So that was one side of my world.
that makes sense.
And I was like, okay, this is disingenuous to have so much to say about the body except to have a connection with it.
Mm,
And so my study of massage, Rolfing, Tai Chi, getting married, having kids, raising children, and doing dissection, that whole part of my life has been a quest for a deeper sense of embodiment so that when I reflect on things ethically, I'm not doing so um, from a position that's alienated from an embodied stance. Like,
mm.
what does the body have to say about this that you're giving all these orders to that I have to live with? So it's very interesting to look into the human form and see, you know, ideas uh, that might influence how we live in the world. Like, in other words, this is how we live in the world. We live in the world in an embodied way. If morality is our way of being in the world and ethics is the study of ways of being in the world, then we ought to learn something about the body, or from at least in my purse. Someone else does legal ethics, they go and get a law degree. Someone does medical ethics and they go become a doctor and an ethicist. I became an anatomist and an ethicist because I felt that in order to really speak to an embodied people about their way of being in the world, you ought to have a connection to the body.
Mm,
And then on the other side of it, as I've looked into the study of anatomy and physiology and all of these things, there's a real lack of philosophical insight with regard to what you're doing. So it's like you go into a physiology book and it says that in the first paragraph, we are using a mechanistic model, or we are mechanists. They're very forward in their admission of that without actually um, considering the implications of that for what you see. In other words, if that's your starting point, well, what will you see, or what will you allow yourself to see? How will you be limited by your assumptions, and how will your assumptions, bring you into new understandings? It can do both. But you have to know you have assumptions. You have to be cognizant of your assumptions to make an argument. And so my ethical training helped me to have a knee jerk, you
yes.
know, recognition of the obviousness of assumptions
That
that are uninspected.
that is so cool, Gil. When I was reading what you wrote on your website, you wrote integral anatomy sees nature as a mirror reflecting self rather than the other and looks to develop an understanding of the whole person as well as the whole body. And I feel like what you were just saying, when I first read that, I went, ooh, let me think about that for a moment. That's good.
Mm.
That's really good. Yeah. But
That's a
I
funny
see what
thing.
you're getting at. I
Yeah.
see what you're
Yeah,
saying.
like
I get it.
let's claim, if we're going to claim a starting point, if you're going to use machines as your mirror, that's a very left brainy way of going about things. You're going to see things as separate parts, perhaps working together, replaceable probably, and without ever getting to a sense of the whole or even connecting with life. Integral anatomy starts with an individual, which is a form of nature. And I do look to nature as my mirror because it feels good. You know, if you're sitting in a box room, you're sitting in a box room right now. I'm sitting in a box room right now,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
forms around us are Euclidean geometric projections of the mind. You're literally in a rectangle,
Yeah.
3D rectangle thing. Well, how does that feel when you are a form of nature? You are trees. You're a friggin' plant in that room. And when your energy reaches out and touches the walls, it doesn't feel its likeness,
Ooh.
right? And so we get weird and tired when we're inside of these boxes. But when we go out in nature, it's like you suddenly breathe. You're like, why can I breathe now? It's because when your heart reaches into the space around you with its electromagnetic waves, and they go quite a distance, it palpates a tree, it palpates grass, a bush, fractal forms. It sees them in a distance. You see that, and you literally see yourself in the mirror. I mean, when I see a tree, I see my lungs. I see my relationship to the earth breathing. I've dissected the lungs many, many, many times, and always enjoy the ever expanding branchings, uh, of the tissues in their interwoven fractal forms. And then you see that outside. I'm looking out the window right now. I can't help it because I'm thirsty now. I'm talking about it. I'm like, I
I know,
want to eat,
get me out of this box. I'm
want
like,
to
I
eat
gotta
me
get out
some
of
tree, like.
here.
And so I intentionally say things like the nerve tree, to bring that into people's consciousness rather than, I don't talk about the nervous system so much. I say it because it gets me into a conversation with somebody because they won't know what I'm talking about if I just say the nerve tree over and over again. So I'll say the nervous system as a way to get you into a conversation so we can actually talk about the nerve tree, which is a living fractal form, communicative organ that is like this pulsing jellyfish in interwoven with every other tissue of the body. Its arms and tendrils are wrapped together with those other arms and tendrils of other differentiated structures like the heart, which is also a branching fractal form. And then they're so interwoven that they mutually interpenetrate each other, such that the arterial tree is wrapped in nerves and the nerve tree is penetrated by capillary system networks, and they're not separable except as mental constructs. And to experience that, in the body, or to witness it at some level, or at least to be told to think about it, brings you a little closer to it, I think, and allows you to have a different experience than if you think, my nervous system is some kind of schematic in a book with lines at right angles branching in and plugging in like a friggin', electrical panel in your house or something.
Oh my gosh. The picture you have on your website of you real high up in a tree. And I saw the nerve tour and I saw you in the tree. I thought, the nerve tree. That's so
Yeah.
cool, man. That's a great picture. Like, just visually seeing the tree, the words connected side by side. I think even that imagery is powerful.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, I have climbed around in it. Like,
Right?
that's what I did. That's what the Nerve Project was me
Mm,
climbing around in that tree and
mm.
getting to know it so that I could get it simplified enough that I could tell stories about it and help other people enter into connection with it, because that's very empowering, I think. To if the nervous system is just this ridiculously complicated schematic in a book with a bunch of taxonomies dividing it over and over again into more and more complicated sets of words, then you're alienated from it rather than enter into connection with it. But if I can show you, you know, a body that was a person's body, actually a person that I knew, all right, a friend, and have you want to know him, and then witness these nerve tissues in such a way that you have to say, that's in me too. And then you can be like, okay, I want to enter into a personal relationship with this, because, and then once I do, then I can own it. And if I can own it, then I'll stop giving it away to the stupid television or what have you. And don't get me wrong, I love to watch Netflix series. We're watching The
Right.
Orville right now. Rachel, my partner, and I, we just love Star Trek. It's great. They're always probing philosophical questions on the shows. I really enjoy them. So I'm not like a anti anything guy. I'm just saying, like,
Mm,
you spend your time the way you want to, the way you
yeah.
choose, and if you feel hijacked, you are probably, and you need to take back the helm, of your own nervous system.
This is incredible. What kind of feedback are you receiving? Like after the presentation, what
Tears,
kind of peers?
hugs, a lot of
Wow.
appreciation, and autonomic reset. People, you can literally get an autonomic reset in this talk. It's quite beautiful, actually. So folks are really, really connecting to themselves and having a lot of aha moments, and get a lot of appreciation, which is always nice. I think that it's easier to learn when you're appreciating rather than when you're antagonized or fighting, or, you can learn that way too, but I kind of like to ride the appreciation train.
Do you ever receive uh opposition? Like I listened to a podcast that you're on earlier uh um today because I wanted to do my homework and at the beginning of the podcast the person had said, if cadaver work and or dissection offends you, then you might not want to listen, which I understand. That's true. Sometimes I hear people say that.
Odd. You just froze for, I don't
Oh,
know, maybe 20 seconds.
my apologies. Let me start that question over. Sometimes when I mention anatomy and cadaver work, people will clam up, like they'll get really squeamish about the concept. I'm
Hmm.
fascinated by it, so I don't. It's not that I don't understand it. I mean, I guess I do understand it because there's a lot of culture that like might look at doing dissection as like, oh, you shouldn't do that, or that's gross, or that
Yeah.
type of. reaction. Now, I'm guessing everybody that comes to your presentation is of our like-minded thinking and
For
are
the
curious and
most
interested.
part,
Do
there
you
are
ever?
spouses who get dragged along and partners, who are
Yeah,
like
yeah,
who love my work and they're keen to share it with their partner, but the partner comes in pretty, skeptical or with
yeah,
trepidation and that same fear you described. And I can win them over pretty quickly because my talks are always woven with nature pictures, family photos, things that soften the blow or rather till the soil so that the
yeah.
seeds that get planted can actually go in, get some water and sprout. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I had a person with zero, the partner of a friend, and the partner was an accountant with no connection to anatomy and hung in there for the whole 5 hours and loved it. So
Nice.
it is
That's cool.
edge of the seat because it's really pretty engaging. So I've made this. I mean, I always say like if my mother can't follow this, I did it wrong. She's 89, she doesn't know anatomy, and so to my mind, if it doesn't engage someone there, it will engage anyone with any professional interest in it.
Yeah,
Uh, and yet, I am not only wanting to engage even professionals as professionals. I want to engage professionals as human beings who aspire to, learn and grow in their whole person, not just in their, professional or intellectual prowess.
that's so cool, Gil. Because as you're saying that, I'm thinking I got to bring my kids to this.
Mhm.
Like I wasn't thinking that beforehand, but now that you addressed childhood challenge and then the way you're weaving it together, it's making me think I need to bring my family because
10 might be a little young for
yeah,
this.
okay. Well, thank you for me. Okay.
I was a homeschool dad and I know what my kids could handle. How old was the other one?
17.
17 could definitely hang with it.
Okay. I'm glad you
It's
said that.
it's
I
at a
appreciate that.
level, there's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
ridiculous amount of
Yeah.
vocabulary verbiage that pours out of my head. And I tell everybody because it's just too many words for anybody. Even the most professional person will be like, oh my God, that's word salad to the max. And so I'm like, I'm going to make a lot of words, but what's more important is that you enter into relationship with images and let my voice be like a sing song in the background,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'll say things that might turn you on, etc. But what it's really
Yeah.
about, is not this massive vocabulary that accompanies
Well,
uh, the
that's
talk.
cool. I appreciate that. That makes sense. I mean, I teach anatomy during our teacher training program, and oftentimes I feel like if I can get 30% to actually listen, and that's a huge accomplishment. What is your technique for when you feel like I'm sure you've been in anatomy classes where you've maybe thought this is such a boring way to interact with this. This could be done so much differently, which I get the feeling this has been your mission to like bring it to life and make learning anatomy fun, or at least interesting and relatable, but it is such a heavy subject or heady subject. Can you give some insight
Well,
into?
I'll tip my hat to Tom Myers and Ron Thompson. They were my first exposure to anatomy study. I was a grad student in ethics, and here I am showing up at the Rolf Institute, this uber intellectual, and my professors at the University of Chicago, their model for class interaction was war. You went to battle for your ideas and you crushed your enemies. That was it. It was brutal. And when I got to the Rolf Institute on Pearl Street there, 301 Pearl, I think it's like a marijuana dispensary now, but at the time it was the Rolf Institute. And Tom Myers was up there in front of the classroom and he's dropping his pants and showing us his quadriceps and he's just funny as all get out. And we had it was like so different than what I was used to, where literally the professor is a general and you're literally like troops marching across the battlefield to slaughter your enemies on the other side of the seminar table. And here we were just playing. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I could be a teacher. You
Oh,
know, it
yeah.
was like that I can relate to. I don't want to do what my teachers are doing in grad school. I don't want to have anything to do with that. It's like intellectual whack-a-mole. Like your professor's up there in a suit at a podium and they say something and someone reaches up and tries to argue with it and they go clonk and someone else goes clonk and they just beat you down. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I respect these people. They're really smart and I don't ever want to
Yeah.
do this dynamic,
Yeah.
but when I saw the way Tom taught and Ron was also hysterical and engaging, and I was like, no, I could do this. And then another a Rolfer also was a huge influence on me, Don Van Vliet. I don't know if you ever heard of Don Van Vliet, but he taught with Emily Conrad. He was Barbara Brennan's Rolfer. He was a Rolfer in New York City, and he was an energy healer as well. He was clairvoyant and he was also a ballet dancer. He had all kinds of talents. But he was a real summoner, a real body explorer. He would spend hours a day on his jungle gym, winding around, talking to his bacteria. He was a very funny guy.
Yeah.
And he was so excited. He was so jacked up about what he was into. And I remember I was going to do an interview with Don, rest in peace. He died a few years back, with Don for the Rolf lines. And I went and I asked him one question and he literally just gave like an hour and a half long answer to it. And I recorded it. This time I pressed record. And when I went home and tried to transcribe it, I was like, there's literally no period. I can't punctuate this thing. It just went on. But the thing that he conveyed was his just deep enthusiasm and excitement. And it was absolutely contagious. And I might not have understood a word he said, but I left exhilarated from my time with him and wanting to be excited about what I was excited about.
Yeah.
And so he led with excitement. And that's what I try and do. I try and lead with excitement. I have found that it's people don't want to know what you know and say, oh, he's smart. They want to be excited about what they're excited about. So I got a good lesson
Oh
from uh,
man.
from Don on that, and from Tom on how to have fun and play in the classroom. And it was I picked up on those themes and ran with them. I also had a wonderful professor in grad school, not in grad school. I had wonderful professors in grad school, although they were generals. My professor in college, Tom McCullough, ethics professor, was kind of my mentor there, and he was all about building community in his classrooms. So he wanted that conversation to happen, but he wanted it to happen civilly with kindness and respect, appreciation, and real listening to someone else. And I took that from him and brought that into my work. And also, I spent 5 years in a psychodynamic energy healing school in Lower Manhattan. After my Rolfing training, I went and did that and became the anatomy teacher for that school. That's really kind of got going when I started doing dissection. And that seed, yeah,
Psychodynamic. Can you say,
psychodynamics and energy healing, yeah.
can you define that for me or give me a little insight on
Sure.
what that?
Psychodynamics really comes from Wilhelm Reich, ultimately. He's kind of the father of psychodynamics, I would say. And Reich is sort of the father of body work, but coming from the psychologist's side of the fence. Reich was in Freud's inner circle and was kicked out because he put hands on people. He's like, it's in the body. You got to touch people. You can't just have them laying there in the couch. And that was the absolute forbidden thing to do, for Freud. So Reich formed his own world and it involved touch. And from him came people like Alexander Lowen and John Parakis with bioenergetics and core energetics. Barbara Brennan studied core energetics with John Parakis, whose wife was a channel, Ava Parakis. And so you had the pathwork lectures that were channel lectures from the guide. And so people would do this work together, pathwork and body work. And Barbara Brennan was in that lineage. And my teacher at the healing school had been Barbara Brennan's assistant for some 5 years or so, and then branched off and made his own school. So I went to this school that involved kind of the lineage of Wilhelm Reich through John Parakis, Barbara Brennan, my teacher. And we would read these pathwork lectures and we would, lay hands on each other. And so that was a foundation for kind of working with groups that I developed. And I don't work any way near the style that my teacher worked. Um, Levent Basi, but I did realize that what's important is that people are growing as human beings here. And so I may be teaching anatomy, but the reason why I'm bothering is to help facilitate people's connection with their bodies so they can grow as a person and have spiritual development. So my workshops have always been transformational. That's and that I think is from my lineage of the healing work.
Amazing.
This is my healing work. It's my
Amazing.
personal healing work to learn, study, and teach, and it's my healing service to create opportunities where people can step into their own transformational experience through, appreciating their bodies, getting connected with them, and then seeing where that might take them.
Amazing, Gil. I can't wait to hang out with you in person.
Woohoo!
I noticed like you're going to be here in North Palm Beach on Feb 22nd, but I also saw you're going to be in Miami on February 20th, and then
Yeah.
in Orlando Feb 25th. So those of you listening, I know it's far and wide, but if you're not in Florida, I know you're all over the place. Your tour dates are so extensive. I mean, when I look at a rock band or a musician, they're not touring even as in heavily as you are. It's pretty impressive. And I just want to thank you so much, Gil, because I wrote you about a year and a half ago and you were so kind to respond to me, and I knew it was like a shot in the dark because I thought, Gil's got so much going on, and we didn't know each other, have a connection, by from a person. And you were so kind in your response and so thoughtful. And you said, I'm real busy right now working on what you're now presenting, and, contact me in the future. And I just want to thank you that for sort of generosity. I felt that from the start. And I mean, your enthusiasm is so infectious. I really appreciate it. The first YouTube video I watched of you, I don't know. I have to ask you this. I swear you had somebody in the background moving the plant around. I think you were, I
Oh.
think you were doing like a something about the IT band, something about how massage therapists say you got to stretch the IT band. And you were saying, look, let me show you what the IT band looks like, which for me was so amazing because I didn't even realize how flat and wide it was. Like
Hmm.
that was cool. I always had like my textbook vision of the
The
IT band.
bellhop stripe. Yeah.
This little thin little wire going down the side of the legs. When you showed on the cadaver what it looked like, but on top of it, the plant's moving in the background. You're doing some funky head movements. And I was like, what is going on right now? And I was just so intrigued. It just like caught my attention. I was like, this guy is cool. This guy's
Well, I
doing
have to
something
tell
so
you,
unique.
the thing is, I move so much. I'm literally like, I'm just like, I'm a mover. You've looked at like little videos of me when I was a boy out on the baseball field, and I'm like moving around. I couldn't stand still. I was one of those kids, and it hasn't changed. It's gotten worse actually. And so we filmed that, and at the time, we'd film it little clips, and maybe Rachel would edit it, and I edit everything now. But those that we were trying to like just throw something up on YouTube. So she grabbed a clip and edited it, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, Gil is just like a Mexican jumping bean here. He's rolling all over the floor. What can we do?" And she had some filter selection, and it was like a stabilizer filter. So she's like, "Let's stabilize him a little bit." So when she clicked the stabilizer filter, she didn't really look at what happened. And then I put it up on YouTube and I saw the plant dancing around the background because basically they stabilized me. And so the plant was rocking
Oh my gosh, man. I
instead of
had
the
to
other
ask
way
that.
around. Instead, if you left it, the plant would have been still and I would have been all over the place. But instead, they kind of made everything move around me. And it just is nauseating. I have so many people writing in underneath, like, "What's with the plant?" You know?
It's brilliant though. I think it worked in your favor because I don't know, little stuff like that. Like when you mentioned your anatomy teacher saying, "Here, let me pull down my pants and show you my quad." And you're like, "What the heck's going on?" It's something about that it just made
It
me
worked
like it
for you.
even more. It worked
Oh,
for
that's
me.
great. I'm
I
glad to
needed
hear
that.
it.
I needed it. Well, Gil, man, this has been such a pleasure. I can't thank you enough. I
Uh,
mean,
the
I
pleasure is mutual, Todd. I'm appreciating your invitation here and a chance to chat with you. And I very much look forward to meeting you in person before long, after I get through the New Orleans, Texas, and then the Florida Panhandle, to Pensacola, Tallahassee, Gainesville, Tampa, Fort Myers, and then we'll come over to Miami and Jupiter and Orlando and Jacksonville.
Amazing. I know I think that the cross section of America that you're being able to witness by touring around the country, that would be my question maybe at the end of your tour. Like, what is your synopsis of America from the ground?
Mm. I'll tell you,
From
I love it because I went around in 2017 to 46 cities. So it was this tour warming up. And so
mm,
I did go to almost all the states, and instead of going to four cities in every state, I went to two. And I'll tell you, once you get out of range of a city, maybe 5 or 10 miles, and the radio starts to go and you can't get those city channels anymore.
yeah,
You realize that most of the country is empty, number one. Like, this is one vast, beautiful, empty land. And you go paranoid about overpopulation when you're in the cities, and understandably, because they're so crowded. But we have just such a beautiful, vast, rich, gorgeous country. And people think in different ways in a country than they do in a city, and they deserve just as much respect. So that was one of my takeaways. I
mm,
really loved that the different environments cultivate different ways of seeing and being in the world that are all needed to make the whole thing work.
yeah.
Cities have to eat, and my respect and appreciation for the folks outside of the cities grew immensely on my last tour, and I think I'm doing the same now. It's just growing some more.
That's so cool, man. Ah, thank you, Gil. This is like what a treat. I can't wait to share this. I hope to have the opportunity to interview Rachel. She looks amazing as well. Rachel
Oh,
Scott.
Rachel is amazing. She's got her whole world. Rachel Scott, yoga. She's rachelyoga.com. She's an amazing teacher. That was one of the things that attracted me to her. I was like, man, this lady, she is smart and on it. And I listen to her working with people because we live together and it's in the background. And I'm like, damn, she's so good at helping people cultivate their talent.
I mean, the two of you together, this is like a powerhouse of education delivery. Do you guys have, I mean, you are living your future. I mean, not to say like what's your future plan, because I mean, I feel like you're doing it now. It doesn't need to be any different or better or change or whatever, you're doing it. But when I see what she's doing with helping yoga teachers create yoga teacher curriculum, creating
Hmm.
templates with her background as like a writer, and
Yeah.
then cultivating plans that work with Yoga Alliance and these other
Hmm.
organizations, I was like, whoa, like that's amazing. I don't see anybody else doing that. So between your work with the body
Yeah,
and
she's
what she's
carved a,
doing,
mm,
I mean,
yeah.
you guys are going to take over the world or something. In a good way, in a good way. Like I like what you guys are doing. I have
Thank
big
you.
respect for it. I think if you ever get tired or wonder you're fixing a flat somewhere in Texas, going, what are we doing? I just want to
We're
let you
always tired and fixing a flat somewhere in the middle of nowhere. That's what chop wood, carry water, right? We do a lot of wood chopping and water carrying.
like you said, the admin. You said the admin, or like it's like mountains of admin. Like if you knew how much work
Tsunami.
behind the scene we had to do, you wouldn't you wouldn't believe it because we see the glory like the 5 hours on stage and we think, wow, how cool. But you're like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that goes behind all this.
And we're our own roadies too. So we're like grunt physical work before and after each event. Like, I drove down this morning to San Antonio to scout out the parking lot, see if my camper would fit. Where am I going to load in, load out, and which screen can I bring in? How high is the ceiling? Do I got to move the
Mm,
chairs? Where's the
mm,
potty? So we can
mm,
tell everybody that. Then
mm.
I come home and
I
uh,
believe it.
figure it
You,
out.
you
So
got you got to get a plant on a little shaker. Like you got to get like some little thing that you can mount a plant on.
So when we left, the day we left for the tour, my son and his girlfriend presented us with the nerve plant. I don't know
Yeah.
if you can see it. It's got this beautiful
Oh,
this
yeah.
beautiful
Yes.
line. So there it
Cool.
is. Here you
All right.
go.
Thank you, man. I needed that. I needed that. That rounded it out right there. Well, and then I have one last question for you. If
Yeah.
you guys are on the road, if we could, I know you can get anything you want on the road. If we could bring you something, what's like something that you absolutely love, like a coconut water or a, a, uh, like, what would you like? A power bar?
You know something? I do enjoy those Coco Vitas,
It is all
but
right.
I never
Cool,
buy
man.
them
All right.
because I don't know. I don't think of it.
Those things are yummy. I know what you're talking about. All right.
That's
Cool, Gail.
super
What about
sweet. That
Rachel? What about Rachel? There's got to be something that,
Rachel is a caffeinated coffee machine.
all
She's
right. Easy. You're making it easy for me,
she
Gail. All
is
right.
her family, her grandma passed away about a year ago. No, 2 years ago. Oh my gosh, time flies. At 102.
Wow.
And this lady was pounding down the caffeinated coffee at midnight. I'd
And
be
just
like,
fall right asleep.
Grandma, can I get you a water? She's like, I said, I've already gotten her 4 coffees. She's like, well, I mean, eh, okay. You know, and she would reluctantly accept the offer of the water, but not drink it because she was pure caffeine. And her dad is just the same. And so is she.
Awesome.
It's intergenerational caffeination maximum.
Yeah. Perfect, Gail. Perfect. Well, I appreciate the insight.
Thanks for asking.
You know it, man. You know it. Well, I can't wait. Thank you for your time, and I will see you soon.
Awesome. Thank you too, buddy.
Thanks, Gail.